Hi, and welcome to our exploration of difficult conversations. This is a brief overview aimed at helping you to better prepare for and have those tricky conversations that we usually dread. There will be points within the recording where you can pause and consider some questions that we pose, and we highly recommend that you do this in order to make the most out of the experience. So let's get started. Susan Scott is the author of the book Fierce Conversations. I think we can all recognise ourselves in this quote, and that for many of us, having conversations around performance, team changes, or mistakes can be off putting, and so we avoid it. But rarely does this end in a good result. We might hope that the problem will sort itself out, but that doesn't usually happen. So I just wanted to start with a few questions before we move on. And the first one is, why do so many of us avoid having challenging conversations? What is it about these conversations that makes us feel worried or concerned about bringing the topic up? I'm just going to give you a couple of moments to think about that. And if you need some more reflection time, please do pause the video here. So the reasons for avoiding confrontation or difficult conversations are as varied as the situations that we might find ourselves in and as different as the individuals having those challenging conversations. But one thing that we do hear a lot from the people that we come into contact with is it's around not wanting to damage relationships in some way, either not wanting to upset someone, not wanting to rock the boat, or wanting to have harmony within their team. And the feeling that having these challenging conversations could upset the balance, could upset the other person, could damage the relationship in some way. The second question is, what type of situations most present the need for us to have a challenging conversation? When was the last time you had to have a difficult conversation with someone? What was that situation around? How did it come about and why was it challenging for you? Again, I'll give you just a moment to think about that. So there's quite a nice concept from a book called Crucial Conversations by Patterson and Graney. You can see the reference on the slide there. This helps us to understand why some of our conversations that we have can be so difficult or feel so difficult. They call them crucial conversations, but we also call them courageous conversations because sometimes we need to be brave to be able to have these conversations. But they say that there's three elements here. The first one is high stakes. This is around there being something important riding on the conversation. There's some sort of risk involved, be that risk to the organisation, risk to relationships, risk to the project that you're undertaking. There is something riding on the success of that conversation. The next one is opposing views. So we think or believe that the other person will have a distinctly different view or idea to ourselves. We go into that conversation thinking that we're going to be in conflict with that person and that we're going to have to argue our case. And then the final one is strong emotions. And we know that as soon as strong emotions are involved, things can become more tricky because we're having to manage those emotions as well as thinking about the communication and the facts and the outcomes that we're looking for. And it could be positive emotions such as excitement and passion, but it could obviously be some of those negative emotions such as fear or frustration. So thinking about the last crucial conversation that you had, or maybe one that you've got coming up, which of these three are involved? Which do you need to take into account? And once we know which of these elements are involved, we can start to think about what preparation we need to do in order to mitigate them. For example, if we know that it's high stakes that are involved, we can think around how we can minimize those risks or how we can build up some rapport and relationship with that other person in a way that allows us to have those opposing views without the damage to the relationship that we do have. And of course, we've looked at why crucial conversations can be difficult, but also we need to look at the flip side and recognize and understand that actually they're an opportunity. They are really important because they give us an opportunity to work through something, to make something better, to make something right. Yes, they are difficult, but they not only help us solve a problem, but they help to develop ourselves, to develop our teams, and to better our organisations. So there's a few ways on the screen there that they can help us in terms of our visibility, our influence. It can help others to see that we are dealing with difficult situations, maybe performance issues within the team or some sort of conflict within the team, and that can help to build respect and trust, and it can help to build better teamwork and better relationships. And it's also an opportunity for us to grow and develop our skills as leaders as well. And these crucial conversations, they really are a skill. And as with any new skills, when we're starting out, we do need to put more effort into the preparation and the planning in the early stages to help us to get that successful outcome. And so we'd like to share what we call the 3 Ps around having courageous conversations. So these are things that we think you could be doing in order to help to improve the chances that these conversations will go as you'd like them to. The first one is to prepare yourself. Really think about the situation from your perspective. How is it affecting you emotionally? We've already said that when strong emotions are involved, that sometimes it can be more difficult to have these conversations. So what are the emotions that you are feeling in this scenario? Why are you having those emotions? What's in it for you? What are you hoping to get out of it? And really prepare yourself for the different types of responses that you might get from the individual. The next one is prepare the environment. So make sure you've got the right type of room, the right setup within the room. You're not going to be disturbed. Make sure that it's a private, quiet space where the other person can feel supported and where they feel that they can talk freely about the topic that you need to talk about. And then the final one is plan ahead. So make sure that you gather all the information that you need, any data or facts that you need to take with you. But really importantly, have an idea of what you want to say, maybe some bullet points or key points that you want to take in, but don't write a script. That doesn't allow you to fully have a conversation with the other person. It's more of a one-sided, I need to tell you something when you start to write a script. So really you're thinking about just the headings and really thinking about what you want to get out of the conversation and making sure that you've got that documented somewhere, and that will help you to create a conversation that flows and that gets to the point. So once you've done all your planning and your preparation, you know what you need to say, you've thought about the emotions that you might feel as part of the situation, you have got all your facts together, then you're going to start thinking about how you're going to structure the conversation. And we've got quite a nice easy structure or framework here for having courageous conversations, which we call the 3R model. So if we break those down, the first R is raise the issue. Let's get the issue on the table. Talk about with clarity what you're hoping to discuss without putting a fluffy edge around it, just being very clear in terms of this is what I need to talk to you about. Then the next R is review the issue. So this is the dialogue. This is the two-way conversation where you get your points across, but also you ask questions and you listen to hear the other person's point of view. You are creating a conversation, not a lecture. So this should be a meaningful dialogue with listening on both sides. And then finally, resolve the issue. The conversation will not be closed until you have a plan for the future. You have some actions moving forward that you have both agreed on and that have preferably some time scales and have been broken down into what needs to happen when. So let's have a little look at a video which goes through these 3 stages. It's a demonstration of the 3R model based on a very common scenario that I think many of us will have been through during the pandemic. And I just want you to listen out for the 3 R's, and I want you to listen out as well for some of the emotion that you're hearing in the conversation, and think about maybe some of the planning and preparation that might have gone into having the conversation. So as you're watching, just think about those few things and consider how you might use some of the techniques that you see within the video in your own conversations.
Hi, Anwen. Glad we found some time to put aside for a proper catch up. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right. Well, you know, it's difficult. Finding it all a bit challenging at the moment. Lots of time online, and it's a bit frustrating, a bit much.
The online stuff in particular?
Yeah. I don't know about you. I just feel like I'm spending all my times on like Zoom or Teams at the moment, and getting a bit fed up with it.
No, I'm glad you brought it up. It is a challenge, but it's something that I wanted to talk to you about, especially in terms of sort of how you're responding to some of your team members in some of the online meetings we're having. I just wondered what your perspective is on that, or whether that's something you've thought about.
Do you know what? I knew this was coming. I knew it. It's really hard. I'm really struggling. This is all very new. I'm completely out of my comfort zone, and I just feel like all I'm doing at the moment is to manage other people's needs and wants, and I can't do what I need to do. I knew this was coming.
So you're struggling with the needing to get on with what you want to do, and other people sort of interrupting that. Is that right?
I just don't understand why we need to do so much talking and catching up online. And
yeah, I know, and we know as well, as you know, with your preferences, that you like to get stuck into things and you like to focus, and we know that that brings out the best in you. So it's understandable that this is tricky. We do need to think about what we're going to do about it. But is there anything else? You know, we talked, didn't we, early on about when we were all first working from home or at home working, putting a rota in place and what have you, and we all agreed on that. But has anything changed for you since then?
My partner's furloughed now, and it's really hard trying to get my day compartmentalized, and he's not working, and I just really want to be able to get what I need to get done so I can spend some time with him. So I'm getting up early, I'm getting loads of work done, and then I've done my hours for the day, and then someone wants to do a team meeting or I get invited to something else. I just feel like I'm being pulled from pillar to post all the time.
Yeah.
And I know I get stroppy, and I'm really...
It's great you're getting up early, Anwen, and getting stuff done, and that you're committed in that way. As far as the rest of the team are concerned, though, we're working to that timetable that we put together. That was the rota and the timetable we agreed. So they won't know that, will they?
No, they won't. And I guess, I don't know, I don't think, maybe I didn't think about, you know, their needs outside of this. I don't know. I just find it really frustrating that I can't get done what I need to get done.
Yeah. Is anyone calling you and contacting you outside of the hours that were agreed?
Not really. But I do sometimes think that it doesn't always need to be a call or a Teams meeting. And I feel like I'm always trying to fit into this arrangement with everyone else and chatting on Teams, and everyone loves doing it, and I don't. And I just sometimes think an email would do just as well.
Okay, look, I hear your frustration. I think that it's been a while since we agreed that first rota and have almost fallen into these ways of communicating. How about as a team, we review the rota, and we also talk about whether there's any more effective ways of managing communication between us all.
That would be really good. And I
need to ask you, though, you mentioned about you know, stroppy, your words, but what can you do to better manage that?
Well, it's pretty obvious that someone said something to you, and I don't expect you to tell me who it was, but I can understand that I get really stressed out about stuff, and I find it very, very hard to manage. So I do get stroppy, and I think the best thing to do would be, if it's all right with you, is if I talk to, you know, the guys as and when I speak to them, and just say, let me know if I'm being,
Okay.
if I'm behaving in a way that you don't like. I'd rather you told me, because I'd rather just have a heads up.
Let's do that then. So you speak to the other members of the team about sort of, you know, as humorously as possible, calling you out on any stroppiness. And I will, you know, I'd also like it if you could really be mindful of that when you come into team meetings, especially if you're feeling frustrated about how that's coming across to other people.
Yeah,
Because relationships within the team are really important at the moment, and we all rely on each other heavily. And I will put something in the diary to review our rota. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Shall we move on to talking about some other priorities?
Yeah. All right.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
So hopefully you could tell from the video that's a really good example of the 3R model in practice. You had Sal, the manager, starting off the conversation in terms of saying, well, actually, there's something that I need to talk to you about, being very clear about what the issues were. And then you had very much a two-way conversation or a dialogue between Sal and Anwen about the issue, and Sal expressed her understanding of Anwen's position. She really listened, she summarised and fed back to show that she was listening, and she took on board some of the things that she was saying. And then at the end, you will have noticed that there was a very clear action in terms of what both were going to do to resolve the issue. So it's a really good example of how you can have a quick 5-minute conversation and work through what is quite a challenging situation that they were experiencing. So just a quick reminder then of the 3R model and some suggestions on how you could use it. So there you go, you've got raise the issue, a couple of ways that you can phrase that, and really remembering to focus on the behavior. We're not trying to attack the person, we are trying to change a behavior or maybe change a scenario. So we're going to make sure that we are very clear about it's a behavioral issue or it's a situational issue, and this is what we want to change. We are not going to use any personal language, you know, you're being lazy, you're not pulling your weight, very emotional language. We're going to really just focus on this is what I'm seeing and this is what needs to change. Then we're looking at reviewing the issue, having that discussion, that dialogue, using those open questions, outlining what we need for them to happen and asking about any barriers that they may be coming up against. And then finally, make sure we have those actions. How can we work together in order to move forward, and how committed are we to making this change? And so I'd just like to finish on this last slide here around managing our emotions. As we saw from the model from Crucial Conversations, strong emotions are one of the key areas that make these conversations so difficult. And we don't want to take emotion out of the conversation at all. Actually, it can be very useful in these conversations. But I think the key thing for me is around recognizing our emotions and managing our emotions before they manage us. So the first step to that is really noticing what the emotions are that we're experiencing within this conversation or within this scenario, and sometimes delving in a little bit as to what that's about. So we might think that we're angry, for example, but actually when we really look at it, it's jealousy, or it's frustration, or it's another emotion that we're feeling that is causing the blockage or the barrier to us having an effective conversation. One of the other things that Paterson and Granny talk about as well is stories, and really understanding what are the stories that we are telling ourselves about this conversation. So for example, if you've got somebody in your team who is not performing, perhaps they're coming in late, or perhaps they're not getting their work done, then the stories we start to tell ourselves and that we start to build around that scenario becomes things like they're lazy, they don't care about their role, they've tapped out, they only come to work for their pay, and then they just want to get out of the door as quickly as possible. Now, some of those stories may have some evidence there may be some facts, but actually sometimes we base those stories on our own beliefs and our own values and the way that we work. And so we sometimes create a shorthand for what other behaviours may be about. So we really need to think about what stories we're placing on these conversations and try to pick those apart. Really think about what are the facts behind that, what backs it up and what doesn't, and start to pick apart those stories so that they are not driving our emotions in the conversation. Because if we go into a conversation about performance with a story of someone being lazy, not really being passionate, and we're really passionate about our roles, then obviously the emotions are going to be higher than if we go into it with a bit more of a blank slate, or maybe with a story more around that person may be struggling, that person may have other things going on for them, that person may not know what's expected of them, or that person may be overwhelmed. So if we go in with a different story, or even, no story at all, then we can often manage our emotions a lot better. And you can see there, the next point is around getting back to the facts and really just asking ourselves, is this factual? What evidence do we have to back up this feeling or this story that we have about this scenario? And just watching out for those, what they call clever stories. So 3 sort of stories that we can sometimes fall into. So the victim, so everyone is against me, I am the victim here, and everyone is out to get me. And then the villain, someone else is to blame, that person's to blame, and not taking any responsibility. And the third one is helpless. There's nothing I can do about it. This is who I am, or this is the scenario, and there's nothing we can do about it. So that feeling of abdicating responsibility when it comes to that scenario or that conversation. So if we just really recognize those emotions and actually use those emotions, and there's a model which you might want to look at if you want to think about how you can better use emotions within your conversations, called Radical Candor by someone called Kim Scott, and she does some fantastic videos on YouTube around how we can use our care and our empathy in order to have better conversations, even when challenge is high. So that's been a very quick whistle-stop tour of having difficult conversations. And I'm just going to leave you with these questions for you to think of a difficult conversation that you need to have, or maybe one you've had in the past if you don't have one right now, or maybe a common one that you come across in your role. And think about some of the elements that we've talked about over the last 15 minutes or so around what's important, what emotions are involved, what are the stories, and how you might plan and structure that difficult conversation. And take some time to do this and really delve deep into what this conversation is about and how you might make the most of it. Thank you very much for joining us at this webinar. Diolch yn fawr iawn, and we look forward to seeing you at a future session.